This is section 9.1, comparing fractions. Basically, you read it in the direction of an English sentence. So if I'm reading math the same way that I read English and I look at a problem, as I come to it this way, this symbol is going to be read as less than because I come to the small end of the symbol first. So that would be a good indicator that I'm going to say less than. This symbol, if I read it in the same direction, I'm coming to the open side first. If you think of the alligator mouth, or the open side is going to be like eating the number, it's greater, you would read this as greater than, and then this is our equal symbol. So first, just understanding by modeling what it looks like to compare fractions. If I had a word problem, like Sophia and Aya ran a race at the park, Sophia ran 2/3 of the way and Aya ran 2/6 of the way, and we want to know who ran farther. So if you have a 1, that's our whole amount. It doesn't have to be 1 mile or 2 miles or 3 miles. We don't know the actual distance, and that's okay. That's the good thing about fractions, is that it gives us a comparison of how far you are compared to a whole amount. So a whole amount, this one doesn't represent a specific distance, just that it's the whole race. So we'll say this is our whole race. Then we want to model Sophia. Sophia ran 2/3 of the way. So if you have the third sized fraction strips, you would be using 2 of them. So that's 1/3 of the way and 2/3 of the way. So that's how far she ran. Then Aya ran 2/6 of the way. So I would get 2 of these to model 2/6. So just by looking at it visually, you can see who ran farther because that's more of the distance covered. So your answer would be Sophia ran farther. You could even start to see how much farther she ran. With the fraction strips, it's really easy to just visually compare. So if I were to write this as using the comparison symbols, it would be that 2/3 is greater than 2/6. You could also use the less than symbol, so you could do 2/6 is less than 2/3. Okay, but they're not equal, and one is definitely more than the other. Here's another problem to try. So some children are decorating cards for a celebration. Bilal finished 2/5 of his card, and David finished 4/5 of his card. Who decorated more? So all of these can be modeled with fraction strips, and then I'll show you a way to do it if you don't have fraction strips. There's still ways to model it, but according to this, so again, if we have 1 whole, that's just a reference point. Most fractions, if it's a proper fraction, is going to be less than 1. So remember the denominator, the bottom number tells us the size of the part. So these are going to be 5th sized pieces, and the top number, the numerator, is how many of those pieces we're going to be talking about. So if I have a 5th sized piece, I need to have 2 of them to represent Bilal's card. So that's how much he finished. Then David finished 4/5 of his card. So I would represent that with 4 of these. So that would be, actually I can put it up here like this. That would be David's card. So these are great because you can really see clearly that David's card is he's going to have decorated more than Bilal's card, just by seeing that there's more of those sections that are completed. So if I were to write this, again, using these symbols, I would say that 2/5 is less than, so remember as you read it, whatever you come to first, as if you're reading a regular sentence, that's how you name the symbol. So 2/5 is less than, whoops, not 7ths. 2/5 is less than 4/5. So if we were to look at these two numbers and we didn't have a visual to help us know which one is greater than or less than, would you still be able to kind of compare? If I knew that the bottom number, the denominator, is the size of the piece, so those are equal, they're 5th size pieces, and this one is only 2 out of the 5, that's like taking only 2 sections of it, and this one is 4 out of the 5, I should know that 4 is going to be more of it. So when you're comparing fractions and they have the same denominator on the bottom, that's the easiest way to compare them, because then you just look at the numerator and you're like, which one is greater or less than, and that's how you can compare them. The tricky part comes when you need to compare fractions that have a different denominator, or when you don't have fraction strips to model it. So I'll show you a few ways you can still do it. So Ahmed is making a pizza. He puts olives on 3/8 of the pizza and pineapples on 3/6 of the pizza, and we want to know which topping is covering more of the pizza. So the two parts of a fraction that we always look at are the numerator and the denominator. So if we have a 3/8 and we have a 3/6. So in this case, the denominator is different. That means the parts are in different sizes. And we want to take from the parts of it the same amount. So if you don't have fraction strips, you can get anything that's a shape. It could be a ruler, it could be, I don't know, anything. So here's how you could do it. One of them, so we'll put 3/8 here, and this one will be 3/6. Actually, we can just leave it there. So here's what you need to do. We need to cut this one into 1/8 sized pieces and this one into 1/6 sized pieces. This won't be absolutely accurate because we're doing our best, but it'll give us kind of, hopefully, a close enough idea. So for even numbers, it's really easy because we can always start at the half point, and you can just estimate. It doesn't have to be exact, and if you want to use your ruler, you can use the ruler, but about halfway, you can kind of eyeball it. So that's 2 parts, and then we cut each of these in half as best as you can, and then each of those in half. So 2, 4, 6, 8. So now we have those into an 1/8 sized piece. For the 6, again, it's an even number, so it's also an easier one to cut into pieces. So again, start at the halfway mark, so at least that part is definitely the same. Now with the 6th, each side of this needs to be in 3 parts. So again, if it's not perfect, it's okay. But what we should see is that the bigger the denominator is, the more pieces that we cut it into, the smaller the size of the piece. So you're actually getting less. If you only took one of these pieces and one of these pieces, you're going to get less amount from here. So just some patterns that you're going to start noticing. So then if I want to actually compare, here's where it's going to get tricky, because if you didn't draw it well, you're not going to get a good visual, but hopefully it'll still work. So in this case, we're going to model 3 out of the 8ths. So that's 3 of that. And this one, 3 out of the 6ths. So you can kind of tell. Which one is covering more? You're going to get more out of the 3/6, because the 6th sized piece is actually a bigger amount. So taking 3 of those, taking 3 of these will give you more. So if we were to write our inequality, or our comparison symbol, we would say that 3/6, or we would start by saying 3/8 is less than 3/6. So drawing a model, you can still do it if you have a consistent object that you can just do it twice and then try to divide up your pieces. Okay, so I'm going to be making some cookies. I'm going to use 2/3 a cup of flour and 1/3 a cup of sugar. And the question is asking, which ingredient do I use more of? So start by just writing down, write down the fractions on your paper so you can see them. So I have a 2/3 amount and I have a 1/3 amount, and I want to compare them using my symbols, my inequality symbols. So the ones with a common denominator, I think are the easiest ones, because you know the size of the piece is the same. I'm talking about a 1/3 sized piece. That means if I had 1 whole amount, like this is just symbolically a 1 whole amount, both of these are cut into a 1/3 sized piece. That's the denominator. And the numerator, the top number, tells us how much we're talking about. So in this one, we're talking about 2 of them. And in this one, it's only 1 of them. So it's really easy to compare them when the denominators are the same. And you would say this answer as 2/3 is greater than 1/3. And which ingredient had 2/3? The flour. So I used more flour in the recipe. So actually we'll do one more when you have a different denominator, just to compare that. And then that's the lesson. The lesson is using inequality symbols. Those are greater than, less than, and the equal sign, which we'll come to later. Okay, Alina is painting her wall. She paints 3/8 of the wall blue and 3/5 of the wall green, and we want to compare these two fractions using our symbols. So our two fractions are 3/8 and 3/5. So in this case, the denominator is different, so the size of the part is different. The numerator, what we're talking about, is the same. We're taking 3 from each of those parts. So some of you will already start seeing the pattern, and you can already do this immediately in your head. That's great. If you still need a model, that's okay too. If you want to just kind of get an idea, just draw a rectangle and try to do your best to draw a second one that's about the same size, and let's compare them. So this rectangle is going to be cut into 8th-sized pieces, so I do my best, starting at the halfway point, to break this into 8 parts. And you can see they're going to be kind of small, kind of smallish parts. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So halfway, half and half and half. When you have even numbers, that makes it super easy. An odd number is a little bit harder. You just kind of do your best guess and just, so here's the trick. When you're drawing sections and the number is 5, you want 5 sections, you're going to draw 4 lines. So I'm going to draw inside the box 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you do your best to space it out. You can erase it and write it again if you need to. What I can clearly see though is which sized piece is a bigger amount. Well, this one, having a 5th sized piece actually gives you more, but then it matters about the numerator. So let's go back to the numerator. In this case, for the 3/8, we're taking 3 of them, or we're painting 3 sections of them, so that's 3/8, and this one 3/5. And again, you can see that taking 3/5 of it is going to be a greater amount. So if I go back to my comparing my fractions, 3/8 is going to be less than 3/5. So again, it doesn't matter which way you have the numbers, it doesn't matter which symbol you choose to use, as long as when you read it, as you would read a regular sentence, when you come to that symbol, whichever point you're coming to first is the way that you name it. So 3/8 is smaller, so I want to have my smaller end here. It's going to be less than 3/5.